My boyfriend Alan can't let go of my past flings despite me moving mountains for him. You're a whore, he screams without proof while he's juggling other relationships behind my back. After all I've sacrificed, how can I help him heal before it's too late? I understand how it sounds, but please hear me out. This story will consist of a mix of what happened and what I later discovered was truly going on, so I apologize if it comes across as a bit blunt. My boyfriend, let us call him Alan, 26 years old male, and I, 25 years old female, met in October of 2023. We matched on Hinge in September, but he ignored me for a month until I finally agreed to come over. We connected immediately, even though he was a player or whatever term you prefer to use. I had been casually dating on and off for several years, not looking for anything serious and never remaining in a relationship for more than a few months. I briefly dated someone in the fall just before meeting Alan and continued to use the dating apps. I did not see Alan again until late November or December, and the only contact from him prior to that was his request for a nude photo. At that time, he traveled for work, often going away for a month or two at a time. I ended things with the other person at the end of 2023. Unknown to me, Alan had still been sleeping with his child's mother, multiple ex-girlfriends, and was in a relationship with one of those exes, whom we will refer to as Jules, up until that point. I was completely unaware of this. We started seeing each other more frequently during the day. We would go out for food and similar activities in early 2024. Prior to that, my only interaction with him was receiving a text at 10 p.m. and I would go over every time. He worked 60 hours a week while I had two jobs, but we began spending more and more time together. When Valentine's Day arrived, he did not make any plans or show interest in the day, so I never brought it up. At that time, my mother had passed away, so I reached out to him on the actual day. I was surprised to find that he was home alone. I came over and opened up to him that night. We started seeing each other even more often, and I ended all contact with my other flings around this time. I wanted Alan desperately. I realized I was in love. I knew he was promiscuous. I would notice stray earrings, clothes, or chargers in his place, and he would claim to be busy at his parents' or friends' houses, only to mention that he had not seen them in months, barely even acknowledging the inconsistency. I loved him deeply. I expressed my desire for a relationship, but he told me he was not ready for one. I accepted this and told him I would wait, offering him a year. I obtained a new job that held greater responsibility than I had previously experienced, and Alan bought me flowers to celebrate. We began going out for meals that were not just fast food. He started taking me on actual dates. I professed my love for him, and he reciprocated, saying he had been wanting to tell me the same thing. Alan is strong, tall, handsome, fit, with a mustache, thick hair, and possesses charm, humor, intelligence, thoughtfulness, and appreciation, many admirable qualities. We began genuinely functioning as a couple, although we were not officially serious. I started mentioning him to my family, and my friends were aware of my feelings. I desperately wanted him. I would pour my heart out, and he would simply sit there and stare at me, never reciprocating, meeting me with apathy, or saying he was just not ready to settle down. At that time, I genuinely believed that he just did not love me as much as I loved him, but I sensed there was more to it. I could perceive the small ways in which he showed affection. I just wasn't sure if I was imagining it. Alan left in June for an out-of-town job for a few months, including a trip to Mexico, which I now know he took with a girl he was sleeping with, whom we will call Belinda. Things started to get rocky. I felt jealous and internalized it. I wanted to be his girlfriend. Shortly after he arrived at the job site, he broke things off with me. We would reconcile or start talking again, during which things would improve, but the same issues would arise once more. I now realized that he had started seeing someone in May, a girl we will call Morgan. He began dating Morgan in May and continued to see her whenever he returned to town while maintaining communication. In July, I slept with someone else, which I absolutely should not have done. He was a guy I had met years prior with whom I would occasionally sleep. However, it always made me feel terrible about myself afterward. I often used sex to cope with my insecurities and self-worth, yet it continually chipped away at me even more. Things remained very rocky. Alan's drinking began to spiral out of control, and he would call me a couple of times each week when he was out of town after the bars closed. Sometimes he would be happy, other times he would not. He would spiral into tangents and become obsessive. He once accused me of sleeping with a black man, a concern he had always harbored for some reason, even though I have never slept with a black man. I am white and Alan is Mexican. We both grew up in relatively diverse areas, making his fixation on this strange. Additionally, he accused me of being pregnant before we met and claimed I had an abortion. He brought this up 2 or 3 times. When he was drunk, he became almost delusional, and his struggles with antisocial personality disorder amplified his paranoia. I discovered that he fixated on these accusations because he has had 6 abortions with girls in the past. I have never even had a positive pregnancy test. We broke up in September after I visited him, and I began using the dating apps again, seeing the guy from the previous year a few times. Alan and I continued to be in a tumultuous situation on and off until November. Now we begin to catch up to the present. In November, he moved back to town and we had a genuine heart-to-heart conversation. At that moment, I felt he was ready to commit. However, he noticed a notification on my phone from someone on Hinge who had sent me a TikTok, and I decided to come clean. Knowing that Alan is an incredibly jealous person, I understood that if I wanted a future with him, simply ridding myself of my past would not suffice. I did not want a guilty conscience. I wanted him to be able to choose me as I am. I deeply regretted each instance in which I communicated with, sent pictures to, or slept with anyone else, and I wanted a real relationship with Alan. I could not reveal everything at once because he was so angry. He would ask me questions and I would freeze and panic in response. Whenever he asked me since then, I chose not to hurt his feelings out of fear. I was afraid of him. He would grow furious, his face turning red with his forehead swelling from the blood. The entire night would become unbearable. Eventually, I revealed to him everyone I had slept with, and he went through my entire phone. He then shared about all the girls previously mentioned, admitting that he was still sleeping with his child's mother, which profoundly hurt me, and told me he intended to get back together with his ex, Jules. Over the next month, he fluctuated between calling me to express how much he despised me and labeling me a whore, to claiming he was out to dinner with some coworker, to informing me that he let Jules throw away all of my makeup and cosmetics from his house. During this time, he also got a matching tattoo with Belinda, who is a family friend, while he was still involved with Jules. It was astonishing. He covered it up a week later. As December approached, things improved. He informed me that he had ended things with all of the other girls, a spoiler alert. He had not, and I even had his name tattooed on me, which I recognize now was foolish. He asked me to move in with him, and despite the fluctuations in our relationship, he claimed he wanted to make it work. Eventually, I did move in with him, but he continued to see Jules and Morgan during this period, maintaining full-blown relationships while I was practically living in his home. Fast forward to the present. Alan has access to all of my passwords, my social media accounts, and he has my location. He essentially tracks my movements every time I am not with him. I allow this, and I even go out of my way to inform him if I have to go somewhere for work, always sending him a picture of the event I am working to verify it. I provide him with all of this information. I have caught him communicating with these other girls on numerous occasions as recently as March. He asked me to be his girlfriend, but a day later he texted Jules, attempting to invite her over. At this point, I was living there, and I am uncertain how he would have pulled that off since we had not spent a day apart for a while. He would obsess over the idea that I was cheating, regardless of the fact that I could account for my whereabouts in texts. I understood that he was paranoid and would become fixated on such thoughts. Today, the breaking point occurred on Facebook. I removed every male friend, even those I had only attended school or worked with, when he sent me a profile picture of someone I went to school with. When I was deleting male friends on Facebook, I remembered that his account was deactivated, which prevented me from unfriending him, and I mentioned that to him. Alan then claimed that I had added this new person simply because it appeared that the guy had reactivated his profile and we remained friends. Keep in mind, we live in Texas, and I grew up in Georgia. This individual was someone I met during high school. We were not friends, and furthermore, Alan has my Facebook login, allowing him to see all of this. I showed him that I did not just add him but had initially done so back in 2013 when I was in middle school, and I removed him. Alan continued to blow up, refusing to acknowledge the evidence I provided explaining why I still had him as a friend. Once again, I did not message this person, nor did he message me. A random individual from high school reactivated his Facebook, which resulted in Alan ending our relationship. He remains unwilling to alter his opinion based on the actual facts and circumstances, and he fixates on a dispute that occurred a couple of weeks ago. What transpired a couple of weeks ago, someone attempted to add me on Snapchat, an individual with whom I hooked up twice, before I met Alan both times, and that I briefly added back on Snapchat last year. I tried deleting my entire Snapchat account months ago because Alan had issues with me having an account, but ironically, he also objected to me deleting it. So the major wrongdoing in his eyes was that someone attempted to add me on Snapchat, and Alan was furious that I had not disclosed this person to him. All he does is obsess over the notion that I am unfaithful, and I cannot endure it. I have done everything I can to help this man understand that the notion I would be unfaithful is entirely incorrect. Our relationship last year was complex, but our relationship this year was meant to be serious. I have been the ideal girlfriend to Alan. He has indeed faced a challenging year in terms of work and mental health, and I have supported him through it all. He has put me through a lot but refuses to confide in anyone about his struggles. I wish to provide him some perspective so that he can see it is not just me, that he is damaging our relationship and his own mental well-being. I have reached my breaking point. I love him, but he needs to change. Reddit, please advise him. I mentioned I would post and send him feedback to demonstrate that I am not a villain. He is simply filled with guilt and projecting his insecurities. Story 2. My first love says he's an ass guy, and now I'm crippled with insecurities. After 2.5 years together, I'm torn. Should I build my confidence or let him go? You're perfect, he claims, but is that just the first love talking? Can I trust him? Hello, I have never asked anything before, and I am not very skilled at writing, so please excuse me if this appears disorganized. Nevertheless, my boyfriend and I have been in a relationship for 2.5 years. We began dating when I was 14 and he was 15. I had already experienced a couple of awkward relationships while he had never even hugged another girl. In my first high school relationship, I was dating a boy who watched pornography on Twitter, which I found unacceptable, so I ended the relationship. When I started dating my current boyfriend, we both expressed our disdain for pornography. I for the reasons mentioned earlier, and he because he had struggled with addiction during middle school and wanted to distance himself from it. However, early in our relationship, I noticed that he would often look at other girls. This would upset me and I expressed my feelings and he eventually stopped. Now that we are older, I do not hold it against him too much, considering his past with pornography and how young we were at the time. About 6 months into our relationship, I came across a girl on TikTok who mentioned how she monitored her boyfriend's screen time to check his browsing history on Safari and Twitter. Therefore, I did the same and checked a date when he was viewing my pictures and discovered that he spent approximately 2 minutes on my photos and another 2 minutes on Safari immediately afterward. I confronted him about this, and he confessed to briefly going on Safari to look at pornography but felt guilty halfway through, so he stopped. Following that incident, we went through a rough period, and I began overthinking excessively. I have always struggled to express my emotions, while he is more emotionally open, which made communication more challenging for us. Recently, I have felt particularly insecure for some reason. For context, I weighed approximately 119 pounds when we started dating, and I was deep in an eating disorder mentality. He was aware of this and would take me out to eat, and eventually I felt that I was improving. However, we both enjoyed eating out a bit too much, and I ended up gaining approximately 47 pounds, which I confided to him made me unhappy with my body. While he would never restrict me from exercising, he would frequently encourage me to dine out, and after a year I finally lost some weight. I now weigh 142 pounds and continue trying to shed more. One persistent insecurity I have always had is regarding my buttocks. When I was slimmer, I did not have a large backside, but it did not bother me much because I was thin. When I put on weight, my buttocks did not grow either, but I was neglecting my self-care to care too much. Now that I am losing weight, I have lost the little shape I had since I have not been lifting weights. I have often joked about wanting a Brazilian butt lift, and he has consistently assured me that I do not need one. However, after the incident regarding the pornography, I asked him about his preferences in adult content. He initially hesitated to tell me, but I kind of forced him to reveal his preferences, which included videos focused on buttocks. Since then, I have felt insecure about my own backside, but again, I did not pay much attention to it. However, after losing the little bit of shape I had, I became extremely insecure the other day and started to spiral into thoughts about not being his type. As always, he tried to reassure me, but I could sense when he was attempting to avoid the conversation. He kept saying how perfect I am and everything, but I felt he was merely saying that to prevent me from feeling more insecure. He repeated the same reassurances until I grew frustrated and expressed my desire to stop talking about it. Finally, he said he would be honest and tell me everything I wanted to know. So I asked him if he prefers larger buttocks, and he kept trying to soften his response rather than just say yes. However, I could tell he wanted to agree. I expressed my desire to consider how to move forward and began pleading for forgiveness, as I often do, but I ultimately disregarded it. Whenever we have conflicts, he consistently sends texts, brings me flowers, and attempts to explain himself. This time he stated that he would give me the time and space I need to reflect, and we agreed not to communicate for the next 3 weeks. We began talking again yesterday, and while we were attempting to resolve our issues, I asked him about his type, insisting on his honesty. Some of the characteristics he mentioned aligned with me, but he also pointed out aspects that did not. One of these was his preference for buttocks over breasts. I began to argue that I clearly do not fit his type, and he tried to backtrack, saying he prefers neither too big nor too small, and he also expressed a fondness for hips. Unfortunately, I do not possess wide hips. I have average-sized hips but with slight dips, so I am unsure if he genuinely likes me or if he is merely attached because I am his first girlfriend and first love. I question if the issue lies with me needing to improve myself or if I should let him go. Additionally, he has never made any hurtful remarks about my body, regardless of my size, and he has never suggested that I should go to the gym to work on my backside, making these insecurities entirely my own. He is not overly fixated on my appearance. On another note, he is genuinely a good person. I believe that for a relationship to thrive, a man must love the woman more, and he truly does. Even during arguments and disagreements, he has never said anything disrespectful. He has started working because he wants to save money to take me on a trip and propose. He consistently brings up discussions about our future, showing that he is a good man. However, I am unsure whether I should stay with him and work on my body and confidence or focus on self-improvement before considering a relationship with him or anyone else. One of my fears is that he will show me more love and affection once I enhance my appearance, and I will just reflect on how I feel and acknowledge that I was right all along. In summary, I do not believe I am my boyfriend's type, and I am uncertain how to respond to this realization.